Welcome to Chapter 11 for exercise programming for special populations. We will be talking about children and adolescents and training these populations this chapter. All right. So the term children refers to boys and girls who have not yet developed secondary sex characteristics, roughly up to the years of age of 11 in girls and 13 in boys. Adolescence would refer to the period of time between childhood and adulthood. So, physical activity in children helps develop motor skills, improve strength, cardio, fitness, and ever increased cognitive performance. Unfortunately, the level of physical activity in children has been declining in the last few decades due to in part cuts in school physical education. Huge. I see this with kids. There's schools where they have basically you're placed into a lottery to see whether or not you get to do PE for a semester or for the year. And even then, a lot of times the phys ed classes aren't every day. They may be like once a week, twice a week. Reduction time, physical activity on recess, reduction time after school, physical activity. Most parents now, if you have, um, if you live in a single parent home, usually the parent's working. And so the kids are, either in some type of daycare or at home. They're older, and the parents don't want them leaving the house. Or if two parent homes, a lot of times both parents work and it's the same situation. Compared to, I grew up in the 80s, we had PE every day. We had multiple recess times as soon as you got home. Normally, you eat a snack, get your homework done as quickly as possible, or if your parents were cool, they'd let you get it done as soon as it got dark. Um, and I mean, you come throw your backpack on, like in your room, and you take off and be outside all day. And that was normal. Fast forward to 2020, we've now added the coronavirus, and now it's even in some parts, it's now goes against state rules of whether or not you can be outside doing unnecessary things, which exercise in some states is even considered unnecessary at this time. And so we see a lot of things that go into this and play into this. The other thing is too is electronics. um, Again, when I was a kid, we didn't have a whole lot of TV stations. Most households only had one television. We didn't even have computers until home computers. I started noticing people probably started having those somewhere towards like when I was in junior high school. My family, we didn't even really have one until towards the end of my high school career. Um, Cell phones, all video games were kind of born in the 80s. So we were kind of there as they were gaining popularity, but it was still one of those things you usually did, like whenever it got dark and it was on the weekends and you got to stay up later, you'd be like, all right, well, since we can't go outside, let's play video games. Um, and so again, yeah, they kind of make this one point, but to be honest, it's a multifaceted problem, and it's created by some things that aren't necessarily problems. So this would be a negative that there's been cuts in PE, but there's a lot of what we look at as positives in our society in terms of things that help us work, help us help us in aspects of our life from a, make something simpler. Sometimes they don't. There's good and bad with cell phones, there's good and bad um with computers, there's good and bad with television and everything else. But this this collective change that's happened is really the issue. You can't really pinpoint one problem and say that's the culprit. Okay. So fundamental movement skills are basic movement skills that are categorized as locomotor skills: running, jumping. Objective skills would be throwing and catching. Stability skills, balance and twisting. Decreases in these skills are correlated with decreases in muscular fitness and cardio fitness, and result as hypokinetic disease, which is lower level muscular and cardiorespiratory fitness that increases the likelihood of cardiovascular and metabolic diseases. Again, you know, kids don't necessarily need to be in organized sports all the time. I understand some situations, and especially like, if you live in certain places where the way the sports programs are run, maybe, especially in some small towns, you may not really want your kids being around certain things. But with that said, all kids should learn sports skills and be playing with other neighborhood kids at least. Um, or they should be getting out, learning some. And again, they don't have to be typical like baseball and basketball and football and that. My kids, um, my 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 boys in particular, they do like football a bit. They do like baseball a lot. That's one they do like. My oldest likes basketball. I think my youngest does. He's just too little to shoot on the hoops at the playground down the street. So that frustrates him. Um, but the two thing, they both like riding their bikes. They both like the skateboard. Um, they they both like my oldest likes he can ride he can ride motocross bike. He My youngest is interested in those things. So there's a lot of there's a lot of alternative things. We live, I was kind of hoping when we moved to South Florida we'd have better waves. I wish we would have moved a little bit further up north. Because one of the things I got into living in California was surfing. That's one, and if we live closer to the beach, I'd love to get my family more into doing some of that. So on and so forth. So there's a lot of, like sports that can further increase these type of skills, and decrease the problems that we see with kids that are lacking. Okay. Significant gains in measures of health and physical fitness and improvements in psychosocial health outcomes have been observed from regular participation in exercise and sports programs. Again, it's not just the physical aspects that increase. Sports build confidence in kids. My oldest daughter's, she's into horse riding. I don't know if that's the best technical or the technical term for it, but she learns all kinds of skills with how to canter and jump and do all these things. And she's got to squeeze the horse certain ways with her, like, there's things that she learns in that sport. And again, she's met friends. She gets a lot of confidence when she executes jumps and things well, that are beyond just the exercise of doing that. Again, daily physical activity helps to reduce body fat, build bone strength, strengthen muscles, improve blood lipids, enhance aerobic fitness, reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression in children, adolescents. The list goes on and on, the benefits of physical activity. There's nothing negative about exercise. Regular physical activity at young age typically translates into those behaviors transitioning as you get older. I can see that in my family. My parents were somewhat physically active when I was younger, but I don't know that they were really physically active growing up. But they quit when I was probably in like late elementary, junior high. But one of the things was is I was always in sports, and all my friends were very active. And so even when we weren't in like formal sports, we were always playing sports. We would meet up and go play wiffle ball or football or basketball, or we used to go rock climbing and rappelling out in the canyons and so on and so forth. And so one of the things that I noticed is that, at least with me and with some of my friends, and again, it's not all of them, but most of us kind of kept up some of those things that we did. Maybe not all the sports, but we kept some of those things up, or at least just got into other physical activities as we got older. And so again, getting kids interested and getting kids doing those things at an early age is very important. Musculoskeletal injury is also more likely with suboptimal muscular health, and research indicates less than 5 hours of physical activity a week is the break point for increased injury rates. Growth, maturity, physical activity. With growth, measures of fitness likely muscular power will naturally increase, but with regular activity, performance will be greater than achieved with growth alone. Exercise professionals must be able to recognize individual differences develop due to differences in the timing of onset of puberty, as chronological age is not always an accurate measure of maturity. Again, you get to that weird age of like 10 to really like 10 to 14, 10 to 15, where you get the early bloomers and late bloomers and all that. And you can have, you think about it, you have these kids and we group them by age. And you've got some kids that have passed through puberty that are now building on a lot more muscle. They've got a lot more strength, a lot more power, so on and so forth. And you play sports like football with some of these kids that are the same age or a year below, because a lot of times we group them within like a 2 to 3 year span of being in like a league. And you've got these kids that hit these growth spurts, their bodies have matured, and you got these kids that are kind of left behind, and they all compete against each other, and you really see a huge difference in the abilities. And again, it's one of those, like, when you're the kid that hadn't matured yet, you're the one that's getting, you're the one getting plowed on the football field, right? And so again, these are some issues we see. In females, the onset of menarche is a primary marker of sexual maturity, but in males, it's indicated by secondary sexual characteristics. Peak height velocity is an important indicator of the onset of growth spurt. It occurs on average at 12 years in girls, 14 in boys. Again, this is why a lot of times you'll see girls during this time will shoot up past the boys, and maybe taller, but then by the time high school ends, most, guys tend to average, taller heights than girls. Strategies for exercise prescription grouping for contact sports especially must take into account peak height velocity, also sexual maturity, cognitive maturity should be considered. It really should. It's, when we put together leagues and things like that, it's not, but it should be. I've heard some great lectures on folks that do run more specialized, they have not only like training facilities where kids come in and they learn to train for sports and do physical training, but they put on their own leagues and they group them together based on sexual maturity and height and like those type of things, rather than by age. And that way, those that go through maturity at an earlier age can then work with those that are closely more related to them, so they're playing in more challenging aspects so that they can grow, and it's not like they're just like physically bigger and better. So they're just playing with those that are lesser than in a lot of respects, physically. Therefore, they're not getting challenged and they're not moving forward during that time period because they don't need to. And so it helps them at that end. And then those on the lower end, again, may play with some folks that are around their age, some that are not, or some that just haven't gone through the maturity around their age. And they're able to not get left behind, but grow together too. And as they pass through maturity, then, they may get placed into a different division, so on and so forth. Again, it's, kind of, like in the world of sports at that age, it's kind of, somewhat groundbreaking. I've heard these talks for a long time. I've started just now seeing in recent years it put into practice. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with those individuals as they move forward. There's a lot of anatomical, physiological, and developmental differences between children and adults that influence program design. 11 want to outline a number of physiological differences. So again, when you look at children and they don't have the hormone production and so on and so forth, um, now you see skills can improve. Their ability to do, if you do weight training and stuff with them, they will get stronger. They may be able to do more reps and so on and so forth. The thing is you won't see a lot of muscle growth in that population in comparison. Now, I mean, versus their sedentary counterparts, yeah, you'll still see a difference, but you won't see a lot. Now, once they hit sexual maturity, then that's where things take off. Okay. Um, So here's comparison of physiological measures in kids and adults. So children have smaller hearts, therefore they have higher heart rates, less stroke volume because they're smaller, less cardiac output because they're smaller, less tidal volume. Again, children have smaller lungs, so they breathe more frequently, smaller absolute VO2, greater relative VO2 when you make the statistical accommodations. Glycolytic activity. Adults have more glycolytic activity than kids. Exercise lactate is greater. Anaerobic performance is greater. Absolute muscle strength is greater, but dang, them kids got that fast exercise recovery, right? A kid can go hard. They'll go sit down for a minute. Adult goes hard. They go sit down for a minute. A kid will be like, all right, let's go play again. Adult, after they sat for a little bit, they're like, I don't know if I want to move for a little while, right? It's, man, everybody always says, I wish I had the energy of a kid. We all wish we did, right? So besides general physiological differences, it has also been observed that children tend not to have the metabolic specialty. A child who is strong endurance runner tends to also have greater strength. So again, we don't have this difference of like some kids are better off being distance runners, some kids are better off being power lifter type things. At that younger age, you'll see kids that are not only strong but have great endurance. And again, just the more they train and everything, their body responds well to all of it. Right. Um, Highlights the need to expose children to a variety of different sports and activities since their strengths may not be known at early age. Again, kind of goes against the old Russian school of thought where they take kids and they try to predict, based on some of their physicality at young ages, this kid's going to be a gymnast, this kid can play football, this kid is better for long distance running, this kid. So, and they used to do those. And again, sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes, just because they were training from a young age, they were pretty good at that particular sport. But a lot of times, girls and guys that they thought would be short and stocky and have better builds for, like, say, gymnastics or something, sometimes would have huge growth spurts, right? And so even though they had the skill set, they didn't have the maximum body type for that particular sport. And that could also be a difference, where kids they thought were going to be huge that would be great basketball players or like maybe football linemen or something along those lines. They may have been big when they're younger, maybe hit an early growth spurt and it was like everything's looking good, but they didn't grow a whole lot, and it's like, oh, don't really want a 5'8" lineman, in the NFL. So, um, there's a lot of that. And so again, it's, knowing that, it's just good for us as um, trainers, coaches, parents, whatever, get your kids in a lot of different things so that they have a lot of different experiences. They can start developing strengths in things, and as they mature, those things will start to become a little bit more clear as well. Children perform similarly to adults in short bursts, high intense activities that rely on phosphagen system due to similar ATP and creatine phosphate levels. Glycolytic capacity is limited though in children. Lactate levels are lower during submax exercise, but lactate removal is similar, and children recover from high intense exercise faster than we do. Cardiovascular differences in children include lower stroke volume, higher heart rate, lower cardiac output at all intensities. They're not going to run as many miles at the same speed as a well-trained adult. All right. Max heart rates are similar throughout childhood. And there's a reason I said well-trained adult, because if this lecture went, no, I don't know, say everybody in the US was listening to this, I would actually put my money on a bunch of kids versus like most of our population, because our population is so sedentary. Although our children's population is getting more sedentary, so I don't know. But I definitely put money on my 6-year-old against most adults. That little dude can motor for a long time. And part of it's because he'll go running sometimes with me. So, but yeah, it's I mean, generally, if you were training about the same, the adults should be better at that. But anyways, prescribing exercise on basis of heart rate is not recommended for children under age of 15. I don't like heart rate prescription anyways, just because based on your level of activity, based on your level of endurance training, um, you can either undershoot or overshoot what somebody can do as well. Like I said, I like RPE type things, but more than that, I like doing the talk test and just kind of working through, like helping the client to understand what their body's feeling and so on and so forth, to really push them. For older adults, older adolescents who want to estimate max heart rate, formula has been recommended. So they use it 207 minus 0.7 times their age. Again, like I said, I'm not a big heart rate person, so you can use it if you want. I don't ever use it at all. I just again, you're figuring, if somebody's in, like the averages that they figured for average, like intensity based on where we think somebody should be. And so, I mean, again, I take each individual where they're at. So I don't use a lot of the average protocol type stuff. Children have lower tidal volume, higher breathing than adults at all exercise intensities during max exercise. Minute ventilation, which is per kilogram of body weight, is equal between youth and adults. Peak VO2 per kilogram body weight remains relatively stable over time during growing years, yet performance on standard field tests consistently improve. Training induces gains in peak VO2 about 5 to 10% or significantly less than gains typically observed in older populations, which suggests that adaptations to aerobic training in children are maturity dependent. Trainability of children and adolescents, although boys and girls do not follow the same rate of change, performance on tests such as the push-up, vertical jump increase from childhood through adolescence for both. So what this is basically saying, again, boys have physiological advantages in a lot of these type of performance tests. When it comes to things such as push up and vertical jump. So again, what you'll see, in younger age, their jumping heights may be similar, their push up numbers may be similar, but as they train, as they go through their sexual maturity, you're definitely going to see an increase in the amount of push-ups and vertical jump heights from boys in comparison to the girls. But the good news is for all is that as long as you're training, the boys push-ups and vertical jumps will go up. The girls push-ups and vertical jumps will also go up, right? So there's movement. There's movement in positive direction for both sexes. Growth-related gains in muscle size, neuromuscular change in motor unit firing rates, recruitment or conduction velocity, as well as alterations in muscle pronation angle are also observed. Untrained youth can experience significant strength gains, about 30% with short-term training, but these are primarily due to neuromuscular changes. Again, you'll see this sometimes in untrained adults where the body doesn't change so much at first because they're learning new coordination skills. A lot of times their lack of ability to move weight is just because their body's unfamiliar with what you're asking it to do. So they have these neuromuscular changes because they're learning coordination patterns. They're becoming more efficient at using the muscles that are there. They're learning new, it's developing pathways from the brains to the muscles to coordinate firing patterns, so on and so forth. And you see huge gains in both youth and adults. But again, with the youth, that's where we see most of the changes that are occurring, especially because they don't have the physiological makeup yet, with their lack of hormones and so on and so forth. So during puberty, as testosterone levels in males increases, muscular hypertrophy will become more prevalent, and the change is much more limited in females due to less testosterone production. Right. Motivations for children and adolescents to exercise are different than adults and should focus on fun. I would actually, I agree and disagree with that at the same time. I agree that a lot of adults will do it out of like duty or responsibility. That is true. Where kids, not so much. Um, but I would also land on the fact that we have a very obese and out of shape adult population. So if we could make it more fun for them, that may help. Um, Competition, again, if competition's fun for both kids and adults, then yeah, try to get into more competitions as adults as well. But yes, and friendships more than health and appearance. That's the one difference. Little kids don't care necessarily as much about their appearance, although even in younger kids, when they can see muscles and stuff, that's fun. I mean, I remember as a little boy flexing in the mirror, seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone as a little kid, and I'd flex in the mirror and be like, I want to have arms like that, So there's some of that, but I would say this holds more true. One of the things about sports, which is great, is creating camaraderie with those that you go into battle with, so to speak, and the experiences that you share, training and competing together, and so on and so forth. And to be honest, every athlete will tell you they do miss the competition, but more than that, a lot of them miss the camaraderie that they had with their teammates. A lot of times they miss being part of a team or part of a group, more than even the competition, which a lot of really elite athletes, I mean, they miss both. But more and more, I always hear the second over the first. Likewise, exercise prescriptions should be different. 60 minutes of accumulated moderate to vigorous daily exercise is recommended, but this can assume many forms and will not need to be continuous block of exercise for kids. Um, Age appropriate circuit training with variety of intensities, for example, are proven to have benefits. While there's no minimum age at which training can begin, basic level maturity whereby instructions can be followed consistently is a requirement. This is a biggest price setback in what you do with kids is uh, the complexity of what you're asking them to do, and their mental and emotional maturity to follow directions and not do stupid things that are going to hurt themselves or others is really the biggest thing. Everybody's just, you can't lift weights with kids, and it's dangerous, you're going to hurt their growth plates, or so on and so forth. No, it really has to do with the ability of a coach to monitor a kid and not let them hurt themselves, but also at the same level of being able to understand that child, and whether or not they're mentally mature enough to do those type of movements safely is really it. Physical characteristics should be taken into account, and suitable methods for monitoring intensity must be decided for each individual. And good communication and trusting relationship will help to avoid overexertion. Again, you got to get on a level with the kids where they're not lying to you one way or the other. And it sometimes it takes a little bit of time. I used to have an athlete that he was very competitive, and I started training him. He was a junior Olympic skier. When I started working with him, he's like 13 or 14. And there's a lot of times I'd ask him to do things, and I'd ask him, I'm like, like, you think you can do this for like however many seconds or how many reps? And he didn't want to disappoint me. And he was saying, yeah, 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 yeah. And a lot of times he'd overdo it, and like there's times he'd fall and he'd get little nicks and scrapes and things. Nothing, he never got like injured with me. And what I had to, I had to keep reiterating to him, like, man, look, I know you want to be tough. I know you want to, like keep improving and so on and so forth. Um, but at the same time, it's not going to do you any good if you're injured when ski season comes. So you've got to be honest with me. I always tell them, I'm like if you feel like you've only got like maybe like one or two more reps in you before like you're gonna collapse or something like that, we need to stop then. It's not gonna do you any good to do one more and then like trip over something when you're trying to jump over it, right, and get hurt. And so it took some constant communication to where, within probably like a few weeks, he started feeling more comfortable saying like, yeah, I think, I'd be like, all right, let's go for 30 seconds. And be like, I think I may only have like, maybe 20. I'm like, all right, well, go until the next jump's probably not going to be a good one. Right. And anyway, and it was, again, communication's key, as it is in any type of relationship. Mode should be a variety of fundamental movement skills as well as other activities that involve apparatuses such as hoops, ropes, cones, and balls. Again, the more skill sets you teach them, even some that may be outside of what they're doing, it helps. There's some crossover. Even like you think of a sport like soccer where hand-eye coordination is a null in most regards for everybody but the goalie. Um, but if you never train that, there's parts of their brain that never get activated that, again, neurally, um, athletes that are well trained in all regards have some crossover, and there's some benefit there. That's the thing. Sometimes doing things that are sort of outside of what you do, there's still some residual benefit that goes into what you're doing. And so you don't want to ignore those things. Now, you may not want to focus a lot of attention and time in those things if they're not directly related to what they're training for. But scheduling a little bit of time here and there to do some excess things. Same thing with auxiliary lifts. Like sometimes lifting in some different ways. With athletes that may be not 100% directly related to their sport. Again, can have some cumulative benefit effects for them. Um, Again, group settings, instructors got to allow for the different skill levels of the youth to be successful and enjoy the activity equally. Again, that's hard, especially in competitive arenas. A lot of times it's we're training to see what rises to the top, and so that can be hard sometimes. So again, it just really depends on where you're working, what the goals of where you're working, so on and so forth, and if you have enough folks, maybe sometimes to break up into groups and so forth. Resistance training is important, should generally involve body weight, light free weights, child-sized machines, elastic bands, and medicine balls. Again, as they get bigger or as they mature in their mentality and stuff, you can start doing more of the like heavier weights, or using the bigger machines, or like incorporating more exercises you might see adults do versus kids. Again, it just depends on the athlete. Intensity and volume. Use of 1 rep max to measure intensity is acceptable depending on the experience level of the subject and proper protocols are followed. Again, if they can't do a squat correctly, why would you 1 rep max them? If you're worried about them hurting themselves on a bench, why 1 rep max them? On the other hand, if they can perform those well, and you can spot them well, again, it's not a bad way to measure their strength, right? High intense training is also allowed, assuming proper form can be maintained. Again, this is critical. We don't want them getting hurt. This is one of the biggest reasons that most strength coaches don't want athletes doing CrossFit. And it's again, one of the other reasons is too is a lot of times, the way that they train may not necessarily be beneficial for an athlete in their particular sport. Even though a lot of folks feel like it trains for everything, it really doesn't. It trains you to be able to go do CrossFit style sports, um, as is, but one of the problems where you hear this, and again, I'm not bagging on CrossFit. I think the theory of CrossFit, I think the invention of that type of training, I absolutely love the idea of it. Absolutely love the idea of it. I've met some coaches at some gyms that really do I mean, top-notch job. Anybody that lives in the Austin area, if you want to go to CrossFit Central, with Jeremy Thiel, um, excellent coach. He's got a lot of coaches there. They're very big on safety, very big on proper technique, while trying to help you get better at doing that stuff. There's just too many gyms out there, and just same thing in general when you go to gyms. There's more trainers and CrossFit coaches out there that are underqualified and underexperienced to be working with general population. They just are. It's a lot of folks don't have the education. They haven't spent the time and the years learning proper form from those that know proper form. And again, that's the problem is in those, and again, it's in commercial gyms too. You can get a certification and you can be trained by somebody that really doesn't know all that much about what they're doing and still be certified, and bad knowledge gets passed down from one trainer to the next to the next. We see that with CrossFit coaches. Bad information, bad training gets passed down from one coach to the next to the next. And it's a problem we see in fitness. So again, I'm not picking on them. I just brought them up as a point because of the you see so many fail videos of people with terrible form in those gyms, but you see it in all gyms, to be honest. And so again, it's one of those things in our industry. We definitely need to create ways of monitoring and asking for greater uh, rate. I don't know if regulations is the best word, but we need to hold people to higher standards. And I think we need, I honestly think we need to be somewhat considered a bigger part of healthcare. And with that, there may be a need for, instead of again, not getting rid of certifications, but also a basic license to practice in fitness. And again, it doesn't fix all things. There's some bad RDs out there as well. There's some bad doctors out there as well. And there's bad nurses. These are all folks that have licensure. But I think it may reduce the amount of bad trainers, so to speak. So 1 to 2 sets, 40-60% of 1 rep max is a good starting point with proper technique. Experience 2 to 3 set, 40-80 is also acceptable. Again, the one thing about the sets is depending on how many reps you're going to have them do, will maybe determine like if you do a lot more sets or not. Because again, especially at the beginning, you're trying to teach them form, right? We're not worried so much about them necessarily getting the exercise out of it, but again, they're going to get exhausted if it's taking them a while to get their form down, because they're going to do, rep after rep after rep. So if you're doing things that tire them out quickly, you may need to do like maybe, 2 to 3 reps, then rest, and then do another set, and again, you may stay at the same weight. You may go down in weight as they get tired, because again, this teaching opportunity, right? We got to get them to learn how to do it correctly. Okay. Then ensure proper rest between each set. Perform training on non-consecutive days. Vary the program to optimize adaptations, and also so they don't get bored, right? Flexibility training is important for children and adolescents as well, but can largely be included in dynamic warm-ups. Again, you can do stretching during the cool downs. That's really the best time to work on gaining flexibility because the body's warm. You've been working out, you've been doing a lot of things. It serves sometimes, just to, it's again, it gives them some time to rest a little bit as they do things, but get some active rest. But more than anything, the end of the workout's the best time. Let's try to gain a little bit of flexibility in some of our range of motion movements, right? Where at the beginning, we're not really trying to improve flexibility, but we want to get the range of motion um, up, for what they're about to do, but we'd like to do it in a manner that doesn't put them in harm's way. Therefore, the dynamic warm-ups, like starting with slower movements and, getting more blood flow, more heat, more, everything as they do a little bit more and more, and they can do movements that are a little bit more range of motion as that happens as well. Overweight kids, objective of exercise programming should be to build confidence, make exercise a part of their daily routine in adulthood. Again, fun is important. Um, Again, a lot of, overweight kids get into that lifestyle because they feel like they're not athletic or whatever, and so they're afraid to fail, they're afraid to be made fun of, like they've either had bad experiences or they're trying to avoid bad experiences, right? So biggest thing to kill that mentality is confidence, right? If they feel accomplished, they feel confident in what they're doing, they'll be more confident to push a little bit harder and to work a little bit more, right? Resistance training is generally enjoyable since it's not aerobically taxing, may boost confidence, and can have benefits on blood glucose and insulin resistance as well. Boys and girls alike like to lift weights at young ages, especially, you can make it fun. And the other thing is too, is they like to see when they move up, they're like, oh, look, you can move up to a bigger weight, or they move up from colors. You go from like the pink weight to the yellow weight to the green weight. Like whether whatever it is, if they see like a hierarchy of moving, it, that's huge, right? Um, Resistance training may also provide more opportunities for social interaction without embarrassing situations prevalent with aerobic activity. Um, Again, especially with the overweight kids, the running and stuff like that. Because they're slow. Again, if they have excess weight, it bounces. Or there's a lot of things. Either the way that they feel they look socially, like a lot of things moving around, so on and so forth, or just poor performance because they're heavier kids and they're trying to keep up with the not so heavier kids. Um, eh, it can there can be I can honestly see that being psychologically detrimental. But again, doesn't mean that you don't want to add a little bit of that in there for some challenge to them. And again, maybe individualizing, or if you have a team, splitting into certain groups sometimes may help, as long as you're not like, all right, I need my fast people here, all right, I want my slow group or my heavy group. Don't break them up like that, but just be like, here's, group blue, group green, group whatever. And you're having them, run at different times during practice, but maybe group them together with those that are close to them, speed wise and heaviness wise, or so on and so forth, right? Pre-existing medical conditions again need to be considered, need clearance. Same as adults, injuries are always possible, but are most commonly due to dropping weights and pinching hands and fingers in machines. Again, just monitor closely. Heat illness is more likely in children in general due to larger surface area to mass ratio, slower adaptations to hot environments, but even more of a risk with certain conditions, including cystic fibrosis and obesity. So be very aware if you have those athletes in particular. Modifiable risk factors associated with exercise related injuries in youth that can be reduced or eliminated with qualified supervision and instruction are outlined 11.5. Again, biggest reason people get hurt when they're working with coaches and stuff is because the coaches don't really know what they're doing, right? Um, Again, here's a lot of the risk factors. So the exercise environment and correct use of the equipment. Again, make sure you have the right amount of training space. Equipment's laid out the way it should be. You get good instruction. Um, you know, stuff's not put where it needs to go. People trip over it. Improper equipment storage and adequate warm up. Again, you don't want to go 100% with cold muscles. Good way to tear something. um, Excessive load and volume, right? And again, kids, they see another kid their age lifting something heavy and they're like, oh, I want to do that. You can't let them do that. They're where they're at. Poor exercise technique, again, good instruction. So having the right trainers. Poor trunk control. Again, eh, they pull that one out, but it's sort of the same thing with any area of the body. You want to target training those areas. Core is an area that may get underserved in some coaching. To me, the fact that I have to put it on there just makes me mad, because that means there's some coaches that are just completely missing the boat. Muscle imbalances. Again, nobody's going to be the same left to right or front to back, or push or pull all the time, depending on the sport they're doing. But trying to, you always want to give a complete training program around those joints. Previous injuries, again, make sure to either work around things or to at least be cognizant of what's going on with certain injuries, and what you need to do to help continue improving the area of injury, or at least navigating around exacerbating any problems. Again, adequate fluid before, during, and after exercise to combat dehydration. When I was a kid, it used to be you can drink as much as you want before practice. Sometimes some coaches would give you like a halfway break and you can get more water. You better be one of the first people over to the water fountain, because you usually got like 5 minutes, so if you're towards the end, you may not have got some water. And then after, right now, it's a whole different ball game. So many folks have had, serious episodes, even death, because they were overheated or dehydrated. Sex specific growth, again, modified training to address these needs and abilities. And chronic fatigue, consider lifestyle factors such as proper nutrition, adequate sleep, and recovery between sessions to see how that helps. Again, any questions over this chapter, I'll be happy to answer, and see you guys in the next chapter.